So this is the Ages and Stages of Children's Creative Development webinar today, hosted by Crayola and EdWeb, the EdWeb community. My name is Kristen Walter. I am the Central Region Teaching and Learning Specialist, and I am your host. And your presentation is going to be by Sherry Sturman, who is our Director of Education. You can join the free community that we have, Champion Creativity. It's there on the slide, the Power of Art Infused Education. As part of that, you have invitations to upcoming webinars. You will get to see the webinar recordings that we have and our resources, take our quizzes, and have the online discussion. And to log into that community is edweb.net/creativity. And at the end of this session, you will receive a certificate in about 24 hours. If you did join by phone instead of the recording, you can take the quiz on the internet at edweb.net/creativity. And we're going to get started officially with our presentation today. You'll see the artwork on the slide there, and that artwork is very representative of what we're going to discuss today. It's about child development and how it happens in stages with very predictable patterns. You can see the patterns on the dolls there, and that represents that there are no specific ages for children's creative development, that we look for these patterns and we look for these stages. And that's why we refer to this as the stages of creative development.
And we are really excited that you're joining us for our favorite subject to be talking about creative experiences in childhood. And I want to start by outlining the 4 objectives of what we're going to cover today. So first, we're going to discuss why art and creative play are so essential in childhood, and really how this is key to the way young children learn. The second objective is to explore updates on what's happening in the field of early child education, what works, what research shows us, and what's misguided, so that we can distinguish what is developmentally appropriate practices and see what it looks like as it's being implemented. A third objective is to review those key child development milestones for each stage in childhood. So this content is very familiar for those of you who have experience with groups of kids, right? Notice when you logged in, we have a lot of educators who are working in a wide span of age groups, and you see these developmental patterns across groups of children. And you also see those individual differences, and that's very much our message here about looking at these patterns, but then respecting those individual differences. So what we're going to ask as we review this material is that you focus on how you can use this information to explain to parents and others, other educators, perhaps early career teachers, policymakers, so that this can help you articulate things that you've been feeling intuitively or that you know from your own observations. And that leads to our 4th objective, which is when you leave this webinar today, you will be prepared to draft an advocacy statement that will help you articulate why art and creative play is aligned with how children learn and so essential in childhood. So as we're going through the information, much of it is going to feel intuitive. You're going to feel like you knew that. But what we hope to give you are those words to articulate it and make a very powerful advocacy statement to convince others. So we're going to start the session today by looking at some interesting facts, right? We're going to be looking at the numbers, some of the data, because numbers can help make the case. They can be important in those advocacy statements. So this is where I'm going to ask you to grab a piece of scrap paper, as Kristen just mentioned. So I'm going to give you a series of questions. So on your scrap paper, you just take, just take a piece of paper and a marker and just put letters A through I on a piece of scrap paper, right? And then when I go through the series of questions, you're going to jot down a number for each of those, and then we'll review the answers and you'll see how you did. So, question A. What is the age when early childhood begins and ends according to the National Association for the Education of Young Children, right? So put the numbers here that show when early childhood begins and then the age when early childhood ends. So that's A. For B, what is the year or the age when the most rapid growth and development occurs? So you'd be thinking about physical growth, social, emotional, language, cognitive development. So just ask yourself, is that 18 years of age when kids are heading off to college, right? An important milestone. Is that 13 years of age when kids are transitioning into being young adults? is at 6 years old when kids are entering elementary school. What is the 1 year that is the year in the human lifespan in which there is the most growth and development? So put the age there. Question C. What is the age when confidence is at its highest point in the human life cycle? That's an interesting one. We'll get back to that in just a moment. Okay, D and E are related questions. So D asks, what is the number of hours that 4 to 5-year-old kids in this country, the U.S., watch TV per day? And E, related question, what are the number of hours that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend that they watch per day? So think about D and E. F. This has got two numbers you're going to slip in here. So most human brain development occurs between the age of blank and blank, right? So what are the two numbers that you're going to put in for F that shows when the brain is, most brain development is occurring? G, what is the percent of parents who agree that time spent playing with their children enhances the relationship? H, what is the percent of elementary school principals who say that art is a high priority? And I, this is a two-part question too, what is the percent of kindergartners who had outdoor play recess in 1989? And then how does that compare to what is the percent a decade later? Okay, so you've got your answers jotted down in your scrap paper. Let's check it out. And as we're going through these, feel free to jot comments, things that surprised you as you're going through. So I don't know how many of you are members of our National Early Childhood Education Professional Association, NAEYC. But according to that organization, early childhood spans from birth to 8 years old. So a lot of you who are signing in and saying you work with elementary school kids, want you to see that relevance and what we're talking here, that early childhood really does go up to 8. And many of the best practices that we're talking about extend through the whole human life cycle. They don't stop at age 8. But that is the definition of early childhood. Not sure if that surprised people or if that was an answer you were familiar with. Okay, so when does most growth and development occur? In the first year. Think about that. From a physical, from a social, emotional, every aspect of child development, the most growth occurs in that first year. And I know many of you were thinking about different key milestones, but that is what the child development research shows us. This is a really interesting one. How many of you were aware that confidence, this sense of being able to do anything, peaks at 5 years of age? Now, we'll talk a little bit later when we go through those ages and stages about why developmentally that occurs, but isn't it interesting to think that we're kind of in our prime in terms of a sense of self and self-confidence at age 5. And there are reasons that social psychologists tell us that that is a key point in what happens after age 5. The number of hours, D and E. So kids in this country are watching 3.3 hours of television every day compared to Academy of Pediatrics is recommending no more than an hour. Yeah, I'm interested. I'm looking at your comments on confidence. Yes, I think that's like really going to be a fun discussion. We will definitely get back to that social development. Okay, so question F. Most human brain development occurs between birth and 5 years old. Wait till you see the slide that we show what's going on in the brain synapses at birth, 5, and then teens. It is really clear that brain development is ramped up and on full steam ahead between birth and 5, and really a critical window for giving kids a lot of this stimulation that we're going to be advocating for here. Back to your numbers. So the percent of parents who agree that spending time playing with their children enhances the relationship, good news, it's 95%. So when you think about your advocacy statements, parents pretty much across the board understand the social and emotional benefits of play. What you might need to focus on, and of course this depends on your community and the parents you're talking to, but you might need to dial up the cognitive benefits of play because if they already get it in terms of social and emotional, you want to focus on that full range of benefits. How many of you got question I right? 89%. I have to say, we are thrilled with this insight. Um, that, when you think that 9 out of 10 principals share this value and really believe in the power of art and education, that's really so important and can affect the whole set of priorities that goes on in an elementary school. So many of you have watched other webinars that Crayola has put on, and you know that we have a partnership with the National Association of Elementary School Principals, in which we focus on increasing creative experiences in elementary schools because that is so important. And if you want more information about that, you can go to Crayola.com and learn about the grant program where we offer creative leadership grants to elementary schools. And we feature those success stories of the grant winners because it is so important to have that elementary school leader be a champion of creative experiences. And then that last question. So back in the late 80s, 96% of kindergartners had outdoor play and recess. Nearly all of them, right? Virtually all kindergartners. And a decade later, that dropped to 70%. Now, it's really scary, particularly concerning, this trend, because now think about the trend towards moving from half-day kindergarten to full-day kindergarten. And schools, we are seeing patterns that schools feel so much academic pressure that they're squeezing outdoor play out of the schedule. And so really important. You can type in the chat box if that's something that you're seeing and that you're concerned about, or really any of these facts. What surprised you and what is a concern to you? Yeah, I see somebody said 15 minutes for recess, too little time. It is difficult for kids to really engage in significant self-directed play in just 15 minutes. Sure, they'll get some fresh air and they'll be able to run around and get some physical activity. But what you're going to see here today is how important it is for children to direct the play and to engage in significant play. So absolutely a concern. So what we're going to do next, I'm glad that we were able to dive into some of those facts because that helps you with your advocacy statements. But what we find when you're crafting an advocacy position, you're really making the case to convince others, is that you do need to go a little bit beyond the numbers, right? They make a case, but it's the stories that help to make that, help people see what it looks like. So we're going to start first with that first question, question A about early childhood. So you'll remember that the National Professional Association, NAEYC, says that early childhood spans from birth to 8 years. And so we're going to have a conversation about each of these stages and what creative development looks like in each of them. So you'll remember the image that Kristen talked to you about in the beginning that showed those nesting dolls. And the point that we want to make here is that child development follows consistent patterns, right? You have to experience a certain level, you have to accomplish certain mastery of certain skills before you can move on to the next. But you don't get those skills magically on a birthday. You get them based upon experience, and you get that based upon the interactions that you have, right? So each individual is going to progress through a predictable sequence of developmental milestones, but they will do it at the unique pace, right? So, and when you think about it, children who have not had a lot of, or kids who get a lot of exposure to creative experiences, they're likely to advance through those stages earlier and more deeply than kids with limited experiences, right? So it's not about a date. We never want anyone to get locked into, well, this is an expectation. Kid's 18 months old. Why isn't he doing X, Y, or Z? It's really about making sure that we as the adults provide these experiences so children can have that, build those capabilities and master that. So thinking about this first stage, how would you describe infancy? Think about the characteristics that best sum up what you see going on in infancy. And again, type into the chat box. It's really great to see your ideas about it. How would you specialize? Would you describe that? So some of our favorite terms when we think about kids in that infant stage is the age of curious observers. So even when a child is too young to be fully locomotive and fully mobile, even when they're laying flat in a seat or infant seat or sitting propped up, they are totally soaking up every sight and sound, right? They are just curious observers or sponges for absorbing all of this. And what particularly captures their attention and makes them attuned is anything unexpected, right? Everything is this sort of delight in the unknown. So you will recall from that numbers facts that this is the period of the most rapid growth, physically, language, social, emotional, right? And a lot of that is because this is the sensory motor period. They are fascinated with tactile experiences, right? So colors, textures, sounds. And you know from experience with this age group, everything goes in the mouth. That is because that's part of that tactile exploration, right? It just becomes another way of gaining information about the world around them. How would you describe the play that infants, very young infants, are engaged in? How would you describe that? I often like to think of an infant's play as based around cause and effect, right? So there's such an awe, such a mystery, and I do this, what are you going to do? And sorting out that cause and effect. So when an infant drops the spoon over the high chair 100 times, it is not to drive you crazy. It's to figure out, like, are you going to continue to pick it up and put it back on the tray 100 times, right? It's this sense of I do this, you'll do what? And so most of that play is around cause and effect. They're looking to master that unexpected and to be able to predict the unpredictable and all the things that they're experiencing around them. So what about art at this age group? Well, the first art experiences are with oatmeal and mashed veggies, right? I mean, face it, it's that magical moment when an infant is sitting in that high chair and realizes I can make a motion, I can drag my finger or my elbow across this colorful thing and it leaves a mark. And there's that sense of awe, right? I just left a mark. Oh, it's a, I can make a sound, I can see emotion, and it's first that delight and the surprise, and then it evolves into this cause and effect, right? I'm going to do this, I'm going to smash my fist and it's going to splat that color all over. Lots of cause and effect play that you see in art on the high chair. Now, then think about how you transition this sort of awe, surprise to that next stage, transitioning to toddlers, right? We've already kind of figured out, I do this, you do that. What's that next stage then? We call the toddler period the age of wonder and constant motion, right? So the beauty is they are still fascinated by everything, right? Totally fascinated, wonder and curious about everything. The part that really defines toddlers is this motion piece. They're no longer tethered to high chairs. They're no longer, sure, on long rides they'll be strapped into the stroller just for ease of locomotion. But basically, toddlers are getting around on their own 2 feet, and they're going pretty fast at doing it. And so there's this tremendous desire to move. And in fact, they often say that it takes more energy for a toddler to sit still than it is to get up and round, right? So it's not about frustrating parents and teachers. It's just they're hardwired to move. And it's important for us to help parents understand the importance of that physical play. So what about their favorite play patterns? They're largely focused around their desire to assert their independence. This is the age of I do, right? What's interesting is when you look at the full human lifespan, there are 2 periods in time that are focused on this independence, this I do, and it's toddlers and teens. In fact, when you step back and think about it, there are so many parallels between toddlers and teens, it's almost uncanny. Those are the 2 stages in the human life cycle that are totally focused on asserting my independence, the freedom to explore, racing. Unfortunately, when they get older, they race in more dangerous vehicles, right? They relish the chase, right? But there are so many parallels between that toddler's desire to be independent and to explore and what happens again in that teenage. It's very much about asserting who I am. The other thing you notice with toddlers is how much they enjoy repetition. So it could drive the adults crazy to have to listen to the same song the 1000th time, but you'll see how toddlers really enjoy that. That's part of knowing what to expect and getting this mastery over the unexpected and being able to anticipate it. Okay, so what does their artwork look like? This is the age where we celebrate the scribble, and we really want to emphasize the scribble part. It is a time where we do not expect realistic representations, right? Toddler artwork is not about the thing they make. It's about the motion. It's about the colors. It's about the blending. It's that process and that joyous experience of making the mark. What's different between the infants and the toddlers' marks are the toddlers are intentional, right? So the infant was kind of amazed, marveled at that sort of, oh, I moved, it left a mark, right? More of an experimental. The toddler is very intentional. Bold marks, circular marks, intertangled marks. It's really very intentional. And so we want to celebrate that scribble stage and not rush it to become representational. It is just not appropriate to expect kids in this age group to be, filling in outlines that others have drawn for them, or asking them, challenging them to make something that looks like that dog or that cat. What they will do is they will build a narrative around what they've drawn. So today the scribble is, here's my dog running around the lake. And tomorrow that scribble can be about a book that they read, and maybe it's about the horse flying over the moon. That narrative will change constantly. And so what's important here is that you celebrate the scribble they're making and you capture the narratives, because they will tell you about those images with all the energy and delight that they put into making them. And that is really the beauty of this stage. They are experimenters. They're going to experiment with art materials, they're going to experiment with music and movement, and there's a great deal of intentionality. So then how does this change as they move from those toddler years up to the preschool period? And as we mentioned in the beginning, I just glanced over Catherine's comment from, yes, scribbles that become train tracks, scribbles can be dog chases, absolutely. It can be very much, and what's lovely is that the scribble can change the story the next time you talk about it. So I love that. So back to talking about preschoolers. So when we looked over the fact sheet, we asked the question about confidence. And there is a reason that the child development experts talk about the preschool years as the age of competence and confidence. This age group truly believes they can do anything. And self-confidence peaks at age 5. It is at the highest point in the entire human life cycle. And when we move to the next stage, you'll see why. You'll see why developmental psychologists say it's really important as a natural maturation process that they become more aware of others' opinions and critique. But at this age, it is beautiful. It is just so empowering. 5-year-olds are very capable of doing a lot of things, and they know it, right? Their minds are really fine-tuned. They have incredible questions. They have incredible fine motor skills. They're strong. They're mobile. And they really are capable. And what's very cool is we've captured that creative energy before the peer pressure starts to seep in and build self-doubt. So it's a really delightful age to be leaning into that confidence and nurture it. And it's largely the way we interact with kids from 5 and beyond if they maintain that sense of creative confidence. So think about preschoolers' favorite play patterns. How would you describe those? Anybody want to put some text? Oh, I see a comment there. Framing their artwork is awesome. Absolutely. Letting them know that you value their art, that will stick with them and maintain their interest in that and that voice and self-expression. Thank you for adding that. So how would you describe preschoolers' favorite play patterns? We like to think of it as pretend, build, create. They're really all very creative. Their favorite play patterns are deeply rooted in these creative experiences, right? They love to live in those imaginative and pretend worlds. They will draw and tell you stories about those pretend worlds. They like to build and construct and do artwork three-dimensionally. You can see here these costumes that these preschoolers have constructed out of paper plates and cardboard. They like to create on any dimensional surface with any material, whether that's an easel, markers, drawings. Those are their favorite play patterns. This really is the age of creative confidence. So lean into it and give them as much of this as you possibly can. Very well attuned to their developmental stage. Their art is still not representational. Look at these examples, right? You begin to see what we call tadpole people, right? Oftentimes their heads are greatly out of proportion with their body and they don't have a lot of detail to them. They're still trying to figure out spatial orientation, and you'll see a lot of experimentation with spatial orientation. They'll do a lot of spontaneous sociodramatic play, not with scripts or rules, but assigning roles to each other and going with the flow of the story. They are uninhibited creators of music and just about anything that can be tapped or or strummed and becomes a form of music making, and they are master storytellers. Preschoolers have incredibly robust imaginations, vivid vocabulary. One of the things we as adults can do to help them is to continue to add to that vocabulary, and by the questions we ask that are very open-ended, and by giving them some of that good descriptive language, and helping them understand key words, you're going to strengthen those storytelling skills that will stay with them. So when children start to move from non-representational art to these, what I would call early buds, you see the red drawing up on top, where Amanda drew herself as a slightly little figure surrounded by the 4 adults in her life who are so important, and you see a little A up above, because of course the first letter a child will ever learn are the letters in their name. So Amanda's first semi-representational drawings were typical preschool. Egocentrism defines this age. We said they are very confident. It's because the world revolves around them, right? It is totally natural at this age to think that they can do anything and that they are the center of the universe. Totally normal for this age. Now let's think about how that translates to the next age. What happens when kids move out of preschool years and head off to elementary school? The way you can define 6 to 8 years old is the age of cooperation and best friends. And we put at the moment in parentheses because truly this is an ever-moving social target. It's like friends of the moment. Yes, it is the age of cooperation and collaboration, but they're very focused on who's watching, right? So they're socially aware. Peer pressure comes in. That does build anxiety. And there's lots of concern about where to belong. Who am I and where do I belong? Social psychologists say this is an essential maturation process, that being aware of others and that, they might have a different critique of your work is an important socialization experience that happens, right? So preschoolers can draw something and think it's great and not pay any attention to what everybody else thinks. But when you move into this particular stage of development, you think, well, maybe it's not all about me. And, I drew a horse, but the kid next to me said it didn't look like a horse. And all of that starts to seep in. So confidence eroding is part of this social experience, but it's important for for adults to continue to nurture and build that creative confidence so that kids continue to express themselves visually and have that voice. So what are the kinds of play patterns that kids in this age group do? They are producers and partners, right? So they're very much about producing something collaboratively, partnering on it. Kids this age attend to rules and mostly love to make rules, right? Games with rules don't work with younger kids. They're always going to change the rules. They don't get it, right? When you're egocentric in the preschool age, the rules don't apply to you anyway. Early school agers, 6 to 8 years old, are very intent on making rules. They talk a lot about what is fair and following rules. So that's a huge part of this play. Their arts tend to be more representational now. They expect that their peers will recognize what was drawn. If I said it was a horse, my classmates should know that it looked like a horse. And they will judge themselves if it doesn't. They become self-conscious. Is it good enough? Their music and drama tends to follow scripts and rules. They lose some of that spontaneity unless, big unless, we as adults encourage that voice in that improv, right? So it's clear that birth to 8 years old are a critical window in childhood. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with Sandra Russ's book that talks about so clearly what happens in childhood matters. It is the foundation of adult creativity. She's compiled an overview of research studies, and that could be very helpful in your advocacy efforts as you go deeper. In addition to the academic research that's available, we're very fortunate in our field that neuroscientists have provided a great deal of evidence to support our case. So neuroscientists' MRIs, the brain scans show that the brain lights up with activity more during play and hands-on experiences versus other passive forms of instruction. So literally, drawing and writing with a handheld tool lights up the brain in ways that sitting and listening and tapping on a computer do not light up the brain. Really fascinating neuroscience research. It demonstrates the importance of physical and tactical experiences. So learning is rooted in curiosity and exploration, not in sitting and listening to answers others have already figured out. There's also something, a really important image on the slide. I'd like you to take a look at the picture in the lower right-hand corner. So this shows the number of synapse connections in the brain at birth, at 5, and at 14. So the highest number of synapse connections in the human brain is at 5 years old. And it is the brain's job to prune after 5. So what is absolutely critical is that we give children from birth to 5 as many tactile, hands-on, creative learning experiences we possibly can, so that they spend their brain at that 5th year as full and robust, has as many synapse connections as possible, so that when they get into those pruning periods, right, that they have quite a fertile field to work from, right? And this maturation process really is about kids just keep the ones they use. And so, yes, we've got to make sure up to age 5 we're building the foundation, but then from 5 on forward we have to keep it going, because if they don't use it, that's what the brain does. It's just going to start pruning those synapses that went weak. So we're very fortunate that in our field we have the brain research. I also want to point out to you, don't know if you knew, that the American Academy of Pediatrics has a policy statement on play. Love for you to read this statement. This is important for you in your advocacy documents. They say that play is integral to academic environments, that it allows children to use their creativity and develop those cognitive and emotional strengths, right? So great language here, mastering their fears, negotiating with peers, making decisions, learning from mistakes, discover, pursue their interests. Play is powerful. And when the pediatrician says this is how your kids learn, that helps to carry some weight. So when we think about the power of play, we've got lots of evidence, right? We've got the pediatricians telling us, we've got the neuroscientists showing us. So one of the things that we want to ask now is, when we talk about the power of play, are we all on the same page in understanding what creative play really is? And again, feel free to type into the chat box some of your own definitions of what creative play is. So if we think about it in sort of 3 major buckets, creative play is child-directed, right? That makes it highly motivating, relevant, and engaging. Now, it could be social or solo. That part doesn't matter, but kids have to direct it. It's not something that's imposed on them by an adult. It enables kids to bring together existing knowledge with new understandings. This is how children construct knowledge, right? Children are not empty vessels to be filled. They build their understanding of the world by playfully interacting with others and interesting things. And the third point, it involves complex choices and problem solving, right? Play is not about adults telling children what to do and how to do it. It is about adults providing those opportunities for the child to discover. So it's rooted in wonder, curiosity that builds kids' capabilities, right? So that helps us to explain what creative play is. Here's some other ways that this helps you. Here's 4 reasons, another way to look at 4 reasons for why creative experiences are so important in teaching kids. Teach kids that answers are discovered, not memorized. Teach kids to discover what is within and around us. Teaches kids to see the world in new ways, and that original ideas solve problems, right? So sometimes it helps to have a very crisp way of outlining, benefits, so definitions to it. And this could be useful to you as you make your articulation pieces to parents or community members. Any of you who have participated in our other webinars know that we talk about how art builds 21st century readiness, and we talk about the 4 C's. So another way to describe it is that art and creative play build 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. And there's another way that we can talk about how art fulfills kids' motivational drivers. We said before that in order to be creative play, it has to be child-driven, right? The child has to be motivated to engage in this on their own, not just told by somebody else to do it. And play fulfills 4 key motivational drivers that really impact what motivates kids to do things, right? Think about what kids crave. They crave freedom and independence, right? So art enables kids to do it my way, right? It gives them another voice. Belonging and communicating. So art provides self-expression and communication, whether they're creating together or whether they're sharing, right? So it doesn't matter if they made it solo, as long as they feel like there's a social connection and that their art is communicating when they're sharing it. So very much a sense of self and belonging and communicating. The third driver is mastery and success. Children have an innate desire to succeed. And art provides that tangible experience and that outcome that they can see, right? So often children will enjoy practicing and achieving mastery of goals that they have set. And you can see here how proud this child was. They set their own goal for doing this, right? This was an aspiration this child had, and so proud. You can see the mastery and the repetition here. But it's about kids picking their goals and feeling that mastery and success. And that fourth is power and control. So when you're young, there's a lot in your life that you don't have control over, right? But art for a child satisfied this need to be the decision maker. So it's a very empowering experience for kids. Another reason that it's so important in childhood. Okay, so let's shift gears here a minute and say, so with all of this support for creative play, what's happening in the field, right? Is everybody doing this? Is this what the pedagogy that we're leaning into? And unfortunately, what's really frightening here is that the Alliance for Childhood has issued a report, The Crisis in Kindergarten, that says what kids need, they're not getting. And it explains why kids need to play in school. I see somebody commenting on worksheets. We're going to get to that in just a few slides. Hold on, because it's scary. It's very scary. So this research report showed a frightening decline of play in early childhood classes. So this slide shows what's going on in 2 cities, multiple schools in New York City and Los Angeles. And what's scary is less than 15% of these classrooms, early childhood kindergarten classrooms, had dramatic play. And over 90% had passive instructional materials, worksheets and flashcards, which we know are not effective in teaching strategy. So this is what we need to overturn. This is the misguided, the pressure that people are feeling. There's plenty of evidence now that the way to build children's literacy skills and numeracy skills is through play, not through passive learning materials. So here's how the authors of that report have described the connection between play and how kids learn. And I'd love you to read this. You can be using this in your advocacy statements that you're going to be writing. I love the language they have here. The children play with purpose, diligence, and delight, right? That the motivation to play comes from within. So they learn a powerful lesson of being self-directed and pursuing original ideas. That doesn't happen with their worksheet. Kids are bored out of their minds looking at a worksheet, right? It is about design of their own idea. It is about visualizing their own thinking. And so that's really what you can use here in your advocacy statements. So that also brings the question, is all play created equal? And I'd like to share with you a wonderful chart that's included in this report because I think it helps us to visualize. The researchers say, no, not all play is equally beneficial. So when you think about the continuum of play structures, there is this sweet spot in the middle where children experience the strongest benefits from experiences that are child-initiated, right? The children initiate the play. And the teacher's role is to guide and to extend, not to be, absent-minded, sitting in a corridor doing their own thing. The teacher is very actively involved, but following the child's lead. And the main role that the teacher has is in establishing an environment that is rich in these hands-on creative experiences. So that sweet spot in the middle is where children get the benefits. And you can see from the photos how this comes to play, right? Teachers talking with children about their ideas, children experimenting. You see on the bottom, children are doing their own graphing and measuring of blocks and doing their own sketches of sculptures as they're planning and recording their sculptures, right? You can see how rich this kind of play is. Now compare that to the other sides of the continuum. It is not a great situation when you see didactic, highly structured classrooms, right, with teacher-led instruction, where teachers are making all the decisions and leading all the conversations. Teachers are not supposed to be sages on the stage, right? And the worst situation is if teachers feel pressure to be scripted, that takes away their own voice in decision making and really, has so sadly eroded the joy of our teaching profession. Instead, the most effective teachers are these facilitators, right? And then let's take a look at the other continuum, because it's weak on the other end too. It's what the authors of this report called laissez-faire. It is not the optimal learning experience if it's one of these anything goes classrooms that leads to chaos, right? Kids aren't going to learn when there's a lot of interpersonal conflict, a lot of chaos, a little discussion, a limited teacher role. So there's a very important role, teachers really being on their toes, stepping into all those wonderful potential moments when you can extend the play. And so it's that sweet spot in the middle. So let's take a look at what it looked like, because I think the photos are so instructive. So this is what it looks like as young children are building literacy skills, right? So you can see from these photos, children have created their own puppets. They're doing improv puppet shows. They're really learning the power of a storyline, the role of a character, how a character fits into a setting and a plot. Those are rich literacy skills, right? You can see in other scenes here that children are drawing a sketch and then trying in their invented spelling in their first starts of writing to tell that story. You can see kids are visualizing first and then telling the story, so that if it's an adult scribe, if the child is too young to have all of the sentence structure and the letter formation, an adult scribe is recording that child's narrative and building that sense of literacy skills. And similar to that, I love the poster up in the upper left-hand corner. You could see the active role the teacher played here, writing down the children's conversations about their problems and solutions. So they're capturing the conversation, they're seeing print has value, they go back to remembering what it says. Clearly an adult wrote that, but children are seeing the value in print as documentation of ideas. That's what this looks like. So what does it look like in building math concepts? Well, you can see here, kids were clearly measuring, clearly comparing, graphing, documenting what they learned about sizes and shapes and spatial relationships. You can see these kids were deep in thought, right? These were important math concepts that came. And I love the way the art representation was used as a tool to plan their block sculptures and as a way to document what came out of it. So that interaction between the three-dimensional block building and that two-dimensional drawing of their sketches and the art presentation is really lovely in how it works together. And this is what it looks like in building science understanding, right? As children are hypothesizing and experimenting, playing with ideas and objects, right? And one of my favorites, this is what it looks like in building family engagement. So, much of what we're talking about here is helping parents understand. Parents get it. They get it intuitively, and they get it even more strongly, more passionately when they experience it. So these are images from family engagement nights at early childhood centers in which parents are working with their kids in these creative experiences. So you can see here, parents are asking their kids to talk about stories. It's not what is it, like it's representational, but it's talk about the story, the colors you use, the process you use. See, you had a lot of energy as you made this, right? Parents are listening to and following the lead of their kids. So I don't know if we have enough time. I think we have enough time to watch our video. Yep. So because one of our main focuses in our series of both family engagement as well as today is helping parents understand, we thought we would show a short 2-minute video that could help you as you carry this message out to parents in your community. It's about how creative play matters, and you'll find a copy of this video in the resource library. So, Charmaine, would you like to let the video roll?
Hi, I'm Vicky Lozano, and at Crayola, we believe that creativity is a skill that can be taught, practiced, and applied to a child's successful future.
Children really think outside the box, and we need to encourage that. We need to practice being creative the same way we practice reading or we practice soccer. And kids that do those kind of things become our critical thinkers, our problem solvers. They become our leaders in the classroom.
Creativity is an important skill for kids. It helps them find a way to express themselves when they're still learning how to write.
Educators and business leaders agree that creativity is the most important skill to prepare kids for the jobs of the future. There are many simple opportunities to provide creative experiences at home. Listen to what your child is interested in. Follow their lead. Kids are naturally curious. Encourage them to imagine.
It allows us to have some fun time together, and it lets her express herself.
Through common everyday experiences, parents can nurture curiosity and build creative confidence.
Art allows him that freedom to broaden his perspective.
The more he creates, the more confident he is with everything else that he does.
Creative experiences build the foundation for literacy skills.
So the drawing and the writing just go hand in hand. The more details they have in their pictures, eventually the more things they have to write about.
It's the first opportunity kids have to express their ideas in a form that can be recognized by others.
Creativity builds self-esteem. It allows children to find their self-worth, to be imaginative.
It helps them with their literacy, helps them with their sequencing, helps them with their math.
We recognize that parents are the first teachers. And at Crayola, we believe that parents and educators are partners.
The world opens up to you. It gives teachable moments. You begin to do things that you didn't know you could do before.
I think some of my best conversations with my kids have been over a box of crayons. All those early learning skills kind of coming together.
To prepare your child for success in the 21st century, start with creativity. Make it a point every day to try something creative with your child. To learn how, please visit Facebook/Crayola.
Great, I'm glad you enjoyed the video. So that is available in the library, and you can, feel free to show it at a parent meeting. It's a great way to start a conversation. And in fact, one of the things that I always like to do is ask people what resonates, what it inspires them to do. So it's short, it's only 2 minutes. And for those of you who've attended our other webinars, we have in our library, in the resource library, a whole series of videos. Most of them are 4 minutes, which isn't too long, and lots of guides for how you can have conversations with parents and community members. So we're going to spend the last few minutes now addressing the fourth objective that we outlined in the beginning. Because you obviously believed in the power of creative play, or you wouldn't have chosen to attend our webinar today, right? It's in many ways a community of people who are interested in creativity. And so what we're looking to the outcome is helping you communicate the power of creative play to others. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on now, that fourth objective. So this is the advocacy exercise, right, that we'd like each of you to do. Please take the challenge that you see here. It's a challenge, again, from the authors of the Crisis in Kindergarten book, Why Children Need Play in School. And I love the challenge. Let's just look at it together. If problem-solving, communication, collaboration, innovation, and creative thinking are to remain part of our legacy as a species, then play must be restored to its rightful place in the heart of childhood. Take on that challenge. And let's think about how you can craft an advocacy statement that you could use with whoever you choose as your audience. And you see when we get into the challenge that we'll give you some choices on the audience. So just want to introduce you to some of the resources that we have available as you're working on your advocacy exercise. So you will see in our community, resources community, you will see this guide. Here we go. It's a green guide called Inspiring Creative Experiences in Childhood. And you will see that inside it talks about the why to and then the stages. So that's very much the slide that you've got in front of you on the screen. So what that resource would do, it helps to articulate the benefits of creative experiences for children in those variety of areas, right? So cognitive, language, literacy, physical, fine motor, large motor, social, emotional, and it talks about, other points that we brought up here today, that importance of giving children a voice and self-direction. So there are resources available, as well as all of the insights that we've given in the webinar. Now here's your advocacy challenge. You will find in the library these 4 upcoming slides. These are 4 different scenarios, just as prompts. You can do your own. You don't have to follow this, but sometimes people like to see an example, right? So we'd like you to craft an advocacy statement around why children need creative play. Now, this prompt is suggesting, and this came from the Crisis in Kindergarten report, how would you articulate this to preschool teachers, right? Teachers who have joined the profession because they love young kids and they're really excited about this, but they got on the job and they started to feel pressure to do those worksheets. How would you help them understand the importance of creative play? So that's your first prompt. The next one is, how would you advocate for more creative play at home as well as in school, right? So this is a prompt in which you would be communicating the message to parents and articulating the importance of creative experiences at home. And you will find a lot of resources on Crayola.com that can help you with that. So that could be your second challenge. The third choice is to think about doing advocacy, and so it would be directed to leaders of schools, early childhood center directors or principals who are working with children in this age range. And this prompt suggests that you lean into the neuroscience, right? And you talk about how play is vital for healthy brains and healthy relationships. So, you clearly are going to choose who you want to direct your advocacy to and what key messages. These are just some suggestions from the report. And the fourth, which I think is really interesting because it ladders up to a level of decision makers who are more farther removed from kids, right, is suggesting advocacy to policymakers. So state legislators, school board members, superintendents. So everybody else that we just talked about, they actually see kids every day, and part of what you're going to say makes sense based on their own observations of seeing kids' energy and interest. What's going to be interesting here is for anyone who takes the challenge to advocate for a policymaker who's in charge of big decisions, right? Funding and policies, but maybe hasn't interacted with the child in many years. And so the report suggests that you might approach the message of academic rigor is engaging kids in child-directed play and explaining how that is the most rigorous curriculum that you could provide for kids. So your advocacy statements are really up to you in who you want to convince and selecting the most compelling arguments. So there are a couple of steps in the process. Select who it is that you want to communicate with, parent, teacher, program director, funder, legislator, whoever. Consider the resources and insights from today's session and things that you'll find on Crayola.com as well as in our Champion Creativity community. Here's the fun part. Translate that message in your own words, right? We would love you to try it out. We would love for you to sketch how it went. But this is really very much in your own voice, in words as well as in visuals of how you communicate it. And then, for any of you who have attended our webinars before, we'd like you to post it in the Champion Creativity community, and you remember there's something special you get at the end of that. So we're really excited that the challenge here today is very much about becoming an advocate, and that leads us to a special invitation that we have for you. So this is brand new, something that we have not talked about in previous webinars because it is so new. We would like to invite you as a group of educators who cares about creativity to help be some of our founding members of a special group we are forming on Crayola.com for you to become a Crayola Creativity Champion. So what it means when you're part of this group is you're going to learn from education thought leaders, receive updates about arts creativity, build your creative capacity and leadership skills, serve as a liaison between Crayola and your school. You're going to share success stories and receive recognition for being a creative catalyst in your community. So it's brand new. We just launched it. The way you sign up is very simple. You just go to Crayola.com/champions. It's going to ask you for some information, how you'd like to participate in the community. And as a founding member, you're going to help us form this and shape it. And you just seem absolutely like, the right group for us to get started with. We actually, for anybody who was at the National Art Education Conference last week, we did the first launch, the first communication at NAEA last week. And in just 2 days, we had 1,000 champions sign up. 1,000 people said they would like to be a Crayola Creativity Champion. So you can be joining this very exciting new group. Okay, so let's wrap up with our next steps. So you're familiar that we always close with what we'd like you to do after the session. So there are a couple of steps here. Review the insights from today's session. Craft your advocacy statement and use it to convince others. We love to see artwork, so sketch how the discussion went, add notes about the reaction, and then post this. Post the statement in your sketch to the forum, right? And that's the way we share. So many of you have participated with before. You know that we love to recognize the educators who have participated. So 50 educators who share their Creative Play advocacy work by May 18th will receive a copy of the Celebrate the Scribble book. It is a gorgeous book. A lot of people talk about it as a coffee table quality book that actually shows the artwork that infants and toddlers make. And it's really about celebrating the scribble. Don't push kids to do representational art when their developmental stage is about scribbling. Let's honor that. And you also will receive a dozen of these hard copies. So when you see the electronic PDF in the library, you'll get a dozen of these hard copy brochures so that you can use those in your communities. And for anyone who's logged on before, you know we love to hear insights from everyone, wherever you are in the world. But unfortunately, due to postal regulations, we're only able to ship this gift to participants from the US and Canada. But please, let's continue to hear from people all over the world. That's a very exciting part. Okay, so we have just a few minutes to do questions and answers. I'm just going to take a quick look. Kristen, you got some questions here. Oh, I see that someone is asking a question about logging on late and getting the podcast. So all of these sessions are archived, and you can certainly log on and watch this session from the beginning on through, as well as catch other sessions. We have some that are very related on how art builds critical thinking skills and how art draws families into schools and builds family connections. So let's see. There's a question about toddlers and the fascination with contrasting colors at this age. So that's an interesting question. I think part of it is, so just to clarify, people were talking about infants maturing into toddlers and about fascination of colors. And I think part of it is, like we said in the beginning, part of it is patterns that we see in kids. Mastery and success building upon developmental sequence, as well as individual preferences. So we know that babies are really fascinated by anything new and novel. It just, the whole world is so new to them. That contrast in colors really catches their eye. There's been a lot of research about strong contrast in color will just immediately capture an infant's eye. And I think for toddlers too, playing with color is very important. But I think with toddlers, you start to see it evolve to being more the decision maker about color. So it's not so much marveling at what else has been created in, say, wallpaper or book illustrations, but it's a bit more about being the decision maker. And I think that might be the developmental difference we would start to see between infants and toddlers. So a pre-K teacher is asking what to do to encourage kids to stay active in art if they're starting to feel some of that social pressure and they're losing some of their confidence in terms of art. And I would suggest providing a variety of materials. That sometimes kids are feeling that pressure if they feel that they're being pushed into representational art, if they feel that, say, a colored pencil is going to demand a certain level of perfection or specificity or detail. And so perhaps get them re-engaged with finger paint or easel paint, large motor opportunities, sidewalk chalk, things that might feel a little bit less demanding and might lean into some of their motor, their desire to move, as opposed to getting concerned about detail. That might be. Sometimes we don't know what might have happened in a child's life in school or at home that sort of shut them down and made them feel like their art wasn't good enough. And so a way to bring them back is to turn that into an exploratory experience with different materials, and then to give lots of reinforcement about that process. Can kids lose their confidence and get it back later? Yes, the absolute beauty of the human being is how nimble and flexible and adaptive we are. And so kids are amazingly resilient. A lot of our work, you've heard in past webinars, we talk about that Crayola provides the visual art coaching to the President's Committee of Arts and Humanities Turnaround Art School. And we go into some of the most high-risk schools and help kids who have faced some real stressful challenges in their lives. And we are always so impressed with these kids' grit and resilience and how they persevere. And that it's often art that is giving them that voice and that confidence. So I just don't want anyone to misunderstand and feel like, it's all over at age 5. That while that social pressure to conform and to be aware of others does kick in around the school age, we still are amazingly resilient, and the interactions that adults have with kids can build that. I think we're closing on the hour, and Kristen has some other things to wrap up, so we're going to close out of the questions now.
Thank you, Sherry. What a fantastic webinar. If you did log in with your email address, your certificate will be emailed to you within 24 hours. And if you joined live by phone, you can take the CE quiz, or if you're just watching the recording, take the CE quiz at edweb.net/creativity. And Crayola is proud to sponsor the Champion Creativity community on EdWeb. And you can get more information on our website at Crayola.com/educators. Many of these resources, videos, some of our past website topics are on that website. We encourage you to check that out. And we'd love to invite you to join us for our next webinar, Wednesday, May the 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. It will be on Creativity Connects the World, How Art Builds Global Understanding. Again, presented by Sherry, who did a fantastic job today. And join the free community. It is free. Champion Creativity, the power of arts-infused education, where you'll receive invitations to upcoming webinars, webinar recordings and resources. You can take the quizzes and participate or read those online discussions. And again, that's edweb.net/creativity. Thank you for joining us today. Have a fantastic week.